You really are clueless, aren't you? It's about the inheritance. The inheritance! Hurry up and hand it over." As soon as she barged in through the front door, Emma spoke cheerfully at her own pace. Despite not being close, her words caught me off guard. "If it weren't for Tom's inheritance, I wouldn't want to come near this gloomy place." Indeed, for her, adorned from head to toe in flashy clothes and jewelry, our home, where Tom's brother and I, his wife, lived, must have seemed gloomy in contrast. However, I thought Emma, who brought up the inheritance without even paying respects to my late brother's altar in the entrance, was far more sinister. This attitude of hers wasn't new. She had always been arrogant about her looks and treated her gentle husband harshly. I had heard from my husband that she changed her attitude drastically and started to cozy up to him once he began to climb the corporate ladder and earn a substantial income. Emma's complete lack of concern during his hospital stays and her lack of emotion at his funeral left me feeling utterly disgusted. I made the decision to cut ties with her completely, but Emma's greediness prevented that from happening. "Come on, I don't have all day. Susan, you must be busy too, right?" Despite her age, Emma's eyes sparkled with the belief that she was entitled to the inheritance. However, I had something that would completely distort that expression. It was the last words from my late husband. "I am Susan. In my mid-60s, I became a widow early on and led a modest life without unnecessary extravagance. About a month ago, I lost my beloved husband due to a worsening chronic illness. We met and married in our 40s, so we had no children. Having supported each other for 20 years, the sense of loss was immense. I wondered who I was cooking for without any children and even thought about following my husband, but I lacked the courage. Moreover, my husband had often said, "Even if something happens to me, I want you to live on without giving up. You are an independent and wonderful woman." After my husband passed away, my life changed dramatically. I watched over him in the hospital at midnight and immediately proceeded with the funeral arrangements. The whirlwind of the past month ended thanks to the encouragement and help from many people, including my brother-in-law and his wife. I barely remember that time, but my sister later told me, "You did a great job handling the funeral and all. Tom must be resting peacefully in heaven." The funeral was attended by far more people than I expected. My husband had been a high-ranking executive at a nationally owned company, so many attendees were unknown to me. Company associates spoke highly of my husband's character, as some had flown in from overseas branches, sharing stories of their outings. Though I regretted not being able to spend ample time with each person, I made sure to note down names and addresses to properly express my gratitude later. Thanks to my sister and her husband, I now find a moment to breathe, grateful for the gentle nature my husband had bestowed upon me, making me feel overwhelmingly thankful. While I take pride in being blessed with such a wonderful person, lately I have been questioning if not everything was as perfect as I thought. The cause of my unease was my sister-in-law, my husband's sister. Emma, being about a decade younger than my husband, was still considered young. Compared to women of her age, she was youthful in appearance and attire, and her high beauty consciousness made her somewhat of a celebrity in the neighborhood. She was well aware of her beauty and seemed to enjoy polishing it daily. Up to this point, there was no issue. Although she was turning 58 and perhaps it was time to put away the miniskirts and bare legs, I didn't mind it much, as it wasn't something for others to comment on. The problem was her habit of making snide remarks towards me. I wasn't as pretty as her, nor was I as devoted to yoga or visiting spas. "Susan, you always look so dowdy. Aren't you embarrassed to look so country bumpkin-like? Tom is wealthy. Why didn't he marry someone more beautiful?" She would scrutinize what I wore, appraising my clothes as if pricing them. "At your age, using a no-name brand bag? Really? And those shoes, how long have you been wearing them? You had them the last time we met too. Sloppy people might dress well, but their lack of taste shows in their accessories. It's obvious to someone like me. Doesn't Tom buy you anything? He doesn't desire much, so if you asked, he'd surely buy it for you. I had enough bags and shoes, but not nearly as many as Emma. If being called sloppy was the extent of it, so be it. I've always been someone who doesn't shop much. In fact, I make it a point to throw away something old every time I buy something new, so my house is almost stark in appearance. Whenever my husband would ask if I wanted anything for our anniversary or my birthday, I'd opt for planning a trip instead. Objects can always be bought, but memories are priceless and irreplaceable. Now that my husband is gone, I'm glad for those choices. Whenever Emma made snide remarks, she would merely scoff at any hint of my reasoning. Tom wasn't exactly handsome, so in that case, you're well matched. But grabbing such a man to marry, you must be after his money, right? No matter the insult, she always ended with this. The trouble with Emma's behavior was her insinuation that I married my husband for his money, which she spread among our relatives. There were indeed many women who had approached my husband with such intentions. He didn't gamble or frequent nightclubs. His only hobby was fishing, so I was surprised at his savings when we married. But I never intended to live lavishly off his wealth. By then I had a 20-year career at my company and had saved a reasonable amount of money myself. Our shared value of not spending much was one reason we married, not because I was after his money, as Emma claimed. Despite repeatedly explaining this to Emma and asking her to correct the misunderstanding among our relatives, she refused to listen. She had unilaterally decided that our personalities did not match and continued to provoke me. Emma has always been competitive, and even my husband avoided her as much as possible. Perhaps because of this, she hardly helped with his funeral preparations. Though I was handling the funeral mainly, Emma never offered condolences when my husband began his hospital visits, or when he was admitted as his condition worsened. She even got angry when I informed her, prompting me to decide not to bother her with updates about my husband's health. Yet in front of my husband I lied that Emma was concerned for him, not wanting to upset him. Until his death, Emma never showed up in front of him, maintaining a reluctant attitude at the wake as if she was forced to attend. However, relatives spoke softly around her, saying, "She lost her appetite and cried daily since hearing about her brother's illness." They suggested her absence at the hospital was because she couldn't bear to see Tom weakened. Hearing this made me feel an indescribable frustration, compounded by the shock of losing my husband, and I teared up. Emma, portrayed as a tragic heroine, didn't look like someone who had lost her appetite or cried. There were no traces of tears or swollen eyes. Despite her command to not contact her, she appeared meek before the relatives. Had my sister not adeptly taken me away, I might have lost my composure and yelled at the relatives. Realizing Emma's selfishness and her lack of respect even for the deceased, I decided to minimize contact with her as much as possible. In the time after the funeral, I gradually sorted through my husband's belongings amidst work and household chores, trying to piece my emotions back together. At first, every item of his that disappeared felt like erasing a memory, but I convinced myself that the memories with my husband were best kept in my heart. I cherished the moments spent with those who would visit the altar, trying to reclaim the peaceful life I once had. Predictably, it was Emma who shattered these tranquil days. She rang the doorbell and rattled the sliding door. "Susan, I know you're there. Your sister has come all this way, so open up." I never once considered her my sister, but Emma raised her voice as if to make an impression on the neighbors. With laundry still to be hung, there was no option of pretending not to be home. "What were you doing? I almost got sunburned after waiting so long." As soon as I unlocked the door, before I could speak, Emma barged in. She thrust a bag from a famous foreign brand into my hands and began to take off her shoes. "Oh, what's the rush?" Emma sighed dramatically. "You know, I've been so busy I couldn't visit. I thought you might be feeling down by yourself, so I brought you something nice." She snatched back the bag she had just given me and began to take out its contents right there. Accessories, perfume, and luxury baked goods. none of which seemed appropriate for me at that moment. Emma's behavior was unnervingly kind today, as if expecting me to be overjoyed by these gifts. I know I've been harsh to you before, but you were the wife my only brother chose. I didn't want his wealth to end up with some greedy woman, but seeing you at the funeral, I realized you were different. No one can shed tears like that without truly loving Tom, or give a speech with disheveled hair disregarding others' judgments. Even in attempting to appease me, she couldn't help but mention my appearance and actions. However, the look she gave me was almost admiring, as if she had finally met someone she respected. Confused by Emma's sudden change, I stood there as she continued to praise me. Feeling increasingly suffocated by the presence of someone whose true intentions were unclear, I gently said, "I'm sorry, but I'm still not done sorting his belongings. The house isn't in a state to receive guests. Maybe you could just pay your respects to Tom." Emma then reverted to her usual cold demeanor, exclaiming, "You really are clueless. Do you think I came all this way just to see your gloomy faces? What about the inheritance? You should need to be told, normally." Confused, I looked at her as she gestured impatiently with her palm up. "How long do you think I've been waiting? I have a good idea of what Tom's earnings were, so I roughly know how much I should be getting. Don't think you can swindle me. Hand it over quickly. If you're planning to deceive me, I'll call a lawyer and the police." The estate distribution is being handled by a lawyer. There's no question of deceit. "Don't play dumb. Half of that inheritance is mine. It's supposed to be split between you and me, right?" I was puzzled by Emma's furious claim. According to the lawyer, siblings of the deceased are typically entitled to a quarter of the estate, and this amount would be divided further among multiple siblings. Since Tom had only one sister, she would normally receive a quarter. However, Tom had expressed concern about this, considering their strained relationship and her historical mistreatment of him. Emma had always mocked Tom's appearance, and along with their parents who favored the beautiful Emma, she bullied him. To prove them wrong, Tom dedicated himself to his studies, won scholarships, attended a national university, and eventually climbed the corporate ladder. This was about all Tom had shared with me, indicating a rather challenging life until then. It's understandable why he would be troubled by the thought of his inheritance going to someone who had caused him so much pain. I had advised him that the decision was ultimately his to make. The resolution Tom arrived at was only revealed to me after his passing. Emma's demeanor changed drastically from her previous act as she began to berate me. "So, as a mere wife, you plan to take nearly all of the inheritance? You're just as greedy as I thought. I always suspected something fishy about you marrying that plain man after turning 40. There's only one reason to spend a lifetime with someone whose only redeeming feature is his wealth. I gave you the benefit of the doubt, listened to your talks of love and shared values. It was all just empty talk. Give me half of your share right now and I'll disappear." The sweet words and gifts she brought were all attempts to pry away the inheritance I received from my husband. I had somewhat expected a hidden motive, given her constant antagonism towards me. Her audacity to scream about it right at the entrance where my husband's altar was made me realize the extent of her lack of morals. I wondered what my husband, listening quietly from heaven, would think of this. I told Emma to wait and decided to show her a document. At the mention of it, Emma's demeanor brightened, suggesting frivolous plans for using the money. I didn't engage with her pace and handed her the document I fetched from inside. "Please, this is from Tom. This is for you to have." What I handed to her was my husband's last letter, his will. Emma quickly unfolded the tri-folded paper, and her facial expressions revealed her shock as she read. "What does this mean? I didn't know." Her ignorance was due to her own failure to connect with my husband. Words were on the tip of my tongue, but they likely wouldn't reach her as she slumped down, defeated. The will stated that all of my husband's assets were to be inherited by me, as his final act of gratitude for a life shared in peace and fulfillment. Reading this, I was again moved by my husband's consideration, even during his illness, ensuring not a single yen would go to Emma. In essence, Emma was entitled to nothing. Though the answer was clear, she seemed unable to grasp reality, murmuring, "What does this mean?" as she stared into the void. With Emma pale and unresponsive, I half forcibly ushered her out and locked the door behind her. Her silhouette swaying and dragging away faded from the glass window of the door. Comforted by the thought that she wouldn't bother me after reading the will, my peace was short-lived as Emma called the next day, accusing me of deception and vowing not to forgive me. Her fury was palpable, even over the phone, but I knew I had done nothing wrong and didn't deserve her insults. Before I could respond, Emma threatened revenge, convinced that she had right to the inheritance and was preparing to sue. Emma's misunderstanding seemed to stem from a belief that I was hoarding the inheritance. Her claims were not only baseless, but also showed a deep-seated refusal to accept my husband's wishes. Faced with Emma's accusation that I had influenced my husband to write the will, I couldn't stay silent any longer. Going there would be a waste of your time. That will was handed directly to the lawyer by Tom himself. I only read it afterwards, so there was no way for me to meddle with it. Plus, I've been informed by the lawyer that you don't have any right to the inheritance, so it would be better for you to not waste your effort. My calm explanation seemed to infuriate Emma even more, her voice growing louder. "What's with that tone? Enjoy your smugness while it lasts. I'm serious about this. I've been calling around since yesterday and finally managed to secure a meeting time with a lawyer. They must have sensed my determination. Since the lawyer is on my side, I'll be able to extract compensation from you." With a parting line that could have come straight from a villain in a comic book, Emma hung up. Regardless of what I could have said, it seemed she wouldn't have listened, leaving me puzzled as to why she bothered calling in the first place. Perhaps Emma thought I'd be unsettled by the mere mention of a lawyer, relishing the thought of my discomfort. Instead, I found a certain clarity in her relentless pursuit to claim what she believed was hers, despite not receiving a single dollar from her brother. It was, in a way, refreshing. Months passed uneventfully, allowing me to sort through my husband's study, which was filled with his belongings. Gradually, I packed up our shared memories and left the home we had lived in together. Fulfilling my husband's wish to live in a quiet house in the suburbs, I sold our home and land, using the proceeds as a down payment for a new place near where my sister and her husband lived. While it was regrettable not to have made this move while my husband was still alive, our dog Maya had been with us for over 10 years, seemed to enjoy the new environment. To prevent her from straining herself on the slick flooring, I even bought a light-colored carpet. Though downsizing meant I had fewer possessions, the thought of gradually creating a comfortable living space filled me with anticipation for the future. However, the sensation of my husband's absence persisted, and the minimal furniture only amplified the feeling of loneliness. On a day filled with aimless thoughts, a sudden call broke through my haze. Without checking the caller ID, I answered, only to be met with Emma's furious voice. "You're determined to ruin me, you scum!" Emma's outburst immediately dispelled my drowsiness, though her reasons remained unclear. Without waiting for my response, she continued, blaming me for her impending divorce due to the absence of the expected inheritance. What? My bewildered reply seemed to confirm her grievances. She likely had promised her husband a share of the inheritance, and its disappearance strained their marriage to the point of divorce, a remarkably fragile relationship. Don't just stand there. Apologize. Your fault has made my life unlivable. What am I supposed to do on my own? You could get a job. You're still young at 50. My matter-of-fact response silenced her momentarily. Whether it was the suggestion to work or the reminder of her age, Emma had to face reality. If you were living off your husband's salary, why depend on the inheritance? Why lead to divorce? He was only after Tom's wealth. If we are not getting your brother's money, I have no use for you. You're just a pretty face with money, and now it's all gone. I wish I could get my years back. He was furious. Why should I be scolded? He's such a pathetic man, earning so little. I'm the one who wants my time back. I had only met Emma's husband during their wedding and yearly New Year gatherings. Emma's husband, like her, preferred flashy brand clothes, accessories, and even foreign cars, giving off a frivolous impression. Given Emma's mention of his meager salary, it seemed likely they had been asking my husband for money as a couple for some time, presumably spending it as quickly as they received it, with little thought for savings. Considering the extravagant items Emma's husband used, which likely were funded by my husband's generosity, it was ironic for Emma to make any accusations. Her marriage was founded on selfishness and a penchant for extravagance, making her current predicament somewhat self-inflicted. I even consulted a lawyer, but I was turned away, told plainly there was no inheritance for me. Everyone's against me, but I can't forgive you the most. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened. Despite my advice, Emma had insisted on seeing a lawyer, only to face the reality I had warned her about, ending up embarrassed and frustrated. Susan, you brainwashed my husband, didn't you? He said he should have married someone like you. Why would he mention your name? You must have seduced him behind my back, right? That's the only explanation. Confess and hand over the inheritance, and I might forgive you. How does it even come to that? I don't even have your husband's contact details. Lies! He never praised a frumpy old lady like you before. You must have seduced him and had an affair. Just confess and hand over the inheritance. What? This conversation is going nowhere. Unable to bear Emma's absurd accusations any longer, I hung up, feeling a headache coming on. With the old house already being demolished and the land sold, there was nothing left for Emma to claim, and I had not shared my new address, essentially cutting off any chance of her imposing further. Out of caution, I immediately set my phone to block her calls, deciding it was time to move on peacefully. Months passed, and I settled into life with my dog Maya, enjoying outings with my sister and her husband, and occasionally dining in the room where my husband's altar was, hoping he too was happy with how things were. Thanks to regular health checkups, I was reassured by the latest results showing no issues, and the local amenities provided everything I needed for a comfortable life. The only minor disturbance had been a call from the city office about Emma. After her divorce with no savings, Emma had applied for social welfare, but was told assistance was unlikely if she had capable relatives. However, the relatives, who once flattered her, now unanimously refused to help, isolating her further. The city office had contacted me as a last resort, but given our strained relationship and her past actions, I felt no obligation to assist. Ironically, Emma, who had accused me of being after money, ended up drowning in her own materialistic desires. Her subsequent fate remained a mystery, with rumors of job troubles and a quiet move following her marital breakdown. As I regained tranquility, cherishing moments with Maya became even more precious. My sister, a longtime dog lover, surprisingly adopted a puppy, bringing joy not just to her but to Maya as well. Watching Maya interact with the energetic puppy, I hoped for a new friendship to blossom, smiling at the heartwarming scene before me.